DU.
Okay, it says we are live.
I see. So basically, that doesn't get picked up on the archival video, but the viewers will hear it, is what
Uh,
you're
when
saying.
I went back and checked last time, I didn't hear that on the. Okay, it says we are live. Hold on a second here.
Okay.
Oops.
So basically,
There we
that
go.
doesn't get picked up on the archival video, but the viewers will hear it,
I'm not sure why that is.
is what you're
When
saying.
I went back and checked, there we go. Okay. I don't know why it also played from on YouTube. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we will get the countdown clock timer going. Need to.
Okay.
There we go. Okay.
Okay. So technically speaking, we are live at this moment, and announcements are being sent out to thousands of people right now that we are live, and they'll start logging in.
This is happening when you hit this notify me button.
If you hit the notify me button, that's it. You get notification that we're live. And that, so of our 175,000 subscribers, I think maybe 15 or 20,000 of them receive notifications.
Hmm. Yeah, let's see how many of them want to spend their time right before Christmas with listening to a live stream.
Well,
Wrapping
hundreds.
Christmas gifts.
Yeah. There will be hundreds. I'll tell you this, given the archival video, my guess is that within the next 24 hours, this live stream will be watched by a few thousand people.
Okay, so we do our best to entertain them.
And over the next week, it could be as many as 5 or 6,000, I would estimate.
Hmm.
Well, while we're live, people can, of course, ask questions. So they get to interact with you and with us, Jana.
Hmm. So I don't see the chat right now.
No, no, we won't see it. That's what the volunteers have access to. They see the chat window. They scrape the best of the questions and put them on a Google Doc that Emmy and I can see. And then we choose the best of those to share with you.
Hmm. Okay.
We'll lob you some easy ones, Jana. Don't worry. You'll know the answer. If not, we can maybe we can do some live remote viewing for people for the answers.
Yes, I just remote view the answers. Um, yeah, let me sit down for an hour with pen and paper and then they come up with that.
There we go.
Yeah, so it's often that they think, oh yeah, can you just read my mind or can you tell what I'm thinking? And of course, the method is it's a lot of work, right? Takes a bit to come up with data.
Sure, because you're doing something that is supposed to be impossible.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's always exciting to introduce new people to the field. So, for example, when they ask, "What are you doing as a profession?" and I um, have to, yeah, over time you probably come up with this kind of elevator pitch um, to tell people what it is.
You know,
Um,
it's not easy explaining that you're doing something that's supposed to be impossible.
Yeah, so I hope this changes over time. We had this just a few days ago. We had the opportunity to present at the what was the name? US Space Disruptors Technology Day, uh,
Yeah.
with lots of people from the engineering field, and some of them who have never heard of this topic. So, but they all are very open to just consider the possibility that things like remote viewing or precognition are a valid thing.
Well, I just checked with YouTube and I see, Emmy, the video that we did, the live stream we did a week ago has been viewed 4,000 times now.
That's great.
Mhm.
Pablo has lots of questions, I can see.
Oh,
Yes, thank you to Pablo, Elizabeth, and Celia who are helping moderate our live stream today. And for those who are joining, we would love to hear where you're joining from around the world. So if you want to chat in where you are. And I also just want to say happy holidays to everybody. And thank you so much for spending this precious time in your life with us to help expand our consciousness and to grow and evolve together. Even though we're not at the top of the program, I just want to say that because I don't know if I'll get an opportunity once we are officially live.
And we also have to thank Pablo, Celia, and the other volunteers for the incredible work that they do on transcribing videos and helping with the magazine and uh, yeah, creating the captions for the videos and all of this other stuff. It's not possible without this team in the background.
That's right. Thank you for mentioning that, Jana. There are a lot of different tasks behind the scenes going on, and we have many volunteers. And if anybody is interested in joining our team and assisting, you are welcome to send an email to friends@newthinkingaloud.com. And Jeffrey Mishlove might actually get back to you, will likely get back to you and see what skills you might have that you would like to contribute to help us with our quarterly magazine that Jana, you are a volunteer. You are the editor and do beautiful work on the magazine. We also have a weekly newsletter and putting out so many videos with amazing thinkers around the world.
Yeah, and I would not be able to do it on my own, right? So we have,
It's true.
I think, a team of 10 people continuously working on the magazine and supporting the work with all the little details that you have to collect and prepare before it's ready.
Yes, there's so many pieces that go into it. So a lot of harmonious flow between all of us working together as a team. Thanks to Jeffrey Mishlove, who brought us all together.
Yeah, sharing a vision always creates big things.
It's true. Jeff, we were just talking about, I think you stepped away for a moment. We were just talking about how grateful we are for the volunteers, for all that happens behind the scenes. So I mentioned how people can get in touch with you if they're interested in volunteering and so forth.
Yes, we are definitely interested in bringing on some new volunteers. Occasionally, we have been able to pay people for some of the work that they do for New Thinking Aloud, but I would say it's over 90% a volunteer organization. And when you consider that we're putting up videos every day, plus publishing a weekly newsletter and a quarterly magazine and a book imprint series, I'd say we're doing an awful lot with volunteer help.
Yes, very much.
Yeah.
A lot of passion, a lot of love and passion for what we're all doing together.
It really is a work of love that seems to drive us.
And a lot of curiosity.
The two most powerful forces in the universe, love and curiosity.
Yeah. Positive energy, right? So this is also what I experienced when I first joined the team or got in contact with the team behind the scenes that are so supportive and yeah, just dedicated to bring it forward. So for each of us, I think there's something in it that where we think we can contribute something to a greater mission.
And in fact, the two of you have made amazing contributions. We're going to be talking about remote viewing for most of our live stream this morning, but you're the managing editor of our quarterly magazine, Jana. You do incredible work. We wouldn't have that magazine without you being the person who initiated it and who has persisted in following through.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it really is beautiful, Jana. And if people want to check it out, go to newthinkingaloud.org for a free PDF. You can also get a beautiful printed copy as well, and also on MadCloud.
Okay, we are live officially. Beginning the program. Welcome, everybody. I'm Jeffrey Mishlove, the host and producer of New Thinking Aloud. I'm with my co-host, Emmy Vadnais, and a very special guest today, Jana Rogge, who is, in addition to being the managing editor of the New Thinking Aloud magazine, is a publisher in her own right with, let me make sure I get it. Correct me if I say it wrong. Center Lane Press.
It's one of the two companies, Center Lane Publishing, actually. Yeah.
Center Lane Publishing, and the other company is?
It's a German publishing house, Eckhaus Verlag. You would probably, Eckhaus is corner house at the corner of the street. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you are speaking to us from Germany, where it is late at night. Thank you for staying up for our audience. And we're going to be talking today about the practical applications of remote viewing. I think it's fair to say the field has evolved since it was exclusively the domain of intelligence agencies, pretty much who tasked remote viewers to help solve problems that seemed unsolvable by any other means. So, Jana, let me ask you to begin our live stream program today by making a short introduction about the topics that interest you the most.
Yeah, okay. Speaking about what interests me the most is not easy in remote viewing. You mentioned the development and the intelligence before an intelligence background, but of course we are not doing spy work anymore. And everybody who comes across remote viewing or even learns to do it, they would of course like to apply it to be helpful, to contribute something, to use the skill for something valuable, right? So over time, there has been a lot of development in the field, and a lot of people have specialized in one or the other, I think I would say, area of working. So we have people working in we call it forensic remote viewing, solving criminal cases, for example, or help finding missing people. Of course, help finding missing objects too, but there are some complications. And we have people trying to predict future outcomes of events, also stock market and so on. We have remote viewing applied in archaeology and even in anthropology. We have projects in the technical field. And of course, we still do research in this area. So my main interests are probably scattered throughout these fields. So I'm interested in bringing remote viewing to use for clients with a research and development background. So for companies, right now we have the problem that most of the clients don't want to admit that they're using remote viewing. So we certainly have some companies and people tasking remote viewers or asking remote viewers for help, but they don't want anybody else to know that they're using remote viewing. So one of the main visions, I would say, is bringing it back to a credible status as a tool that you can use for information gathering. On the other hand, we still have to do a lot of research on how it works and how several factors play together when you want to access certain things. And then maybe if we can draw a triangle, the third part would be to educate people about remote viewing and to train them to be, to use this skill to the full capacity that we have. I have a short presentation that I have prepared. I know it's not usual that we do screen presentations here, but it helps me explain better a bit of the background of application work or applied work in remote viewing. So I'm trying to share my screen right now. Let's see if it works.
Yes, we see it.
We see it. Perfect. I'm just dragging it on my other screen that I can see it too. Okay. The expectations of, huh?
It looks like it's been lost, or at least on my screen, the slide
Okay.
has become.
There, now it's full.
Okay, then I'm just looking over there and it doesn't. I have several screens here and I was just flipping over to the other screen. You see it again?
Yes.
Okay. So first thing I want to talk about is how the expectations of new clients differs from how it really is to work with remote viewing. What most people think is you have a trained remote viewer and then you have yourself as the client, and then you ask them a question and you get your session back, which has or has not the answer to your question. But this is not how it works, and there are several reasons. The main reason is that a key feature of remote viewing is that we keep the viewers blind to the target. It wouldn't work in this constellation. So we can think of project work in remote viewing more like, let's say, working with a rock band. You know the front man, you know the name of the band or whatever, but there are so many other people in the background who are necessary to even get them on a stage. You have a tour manager, production manager, stage manager, sound engineers, technicians for the light, and so on and so on. So what we do is the client talks to a project manager. So for example, this would be me if they work with me. And the project manager gets to know the full question. Oftentimes, clients do not have an extensive background on remote viewing. They don't know exactly how it works and what the best way would be to ask or task a remote viewer on a question. But the project manager knows. And then in the second step, we have, most of the time, we have a separate tasker who is, in some cases, semi-blind to the question. And the tasker creates the tasking number, which is a representation of the actual question. So between project manager and client, we discuss what exactly we want to know. And there are several things that we have to consider to make it work. And then the tasker creates this tasking number, 8675309. And this number is the only thing that the remote viewers see. So they don't know what the question is. And I don't want to go in too deep into how remote viewing works. We have other interviews that can explain this in detail. So what we do is we work with several remote viewers in parallel. Each one of them gets the same tasking number, and they all work separately. So each one on their own. And some occasions they are assisted by a monitor who monitors the session. And then the viewer produces a session transcript, and the analyst or analysts, and in most cases there's more than one analyst, they get to see the session transcripts, and they come up with an analysis, and this goes through the project manager, who then writes a report, and the report goes to the client. And this is where we can apply these blinding protocols. In all cases, the viewer and the monitor are kept blind to the target, and in some cases also analysts and tasker. It's different depending on the question. So we have a single blind or a double blind setting. In research projects, we maintain double blind or triple blind blinding conditions to have it as reliable as possible. And then in some cases, we have a mode that we call legally blind tasking or operational front loading. For example, if my target would be, let's say, describing a place, right? What we had recently in a project, the task was to describe just the shape and configuration of a geological formation. And the operational front loading to the viewers would be that you are asked to describe a site. And this means if they discover, let's say, life forms, events, whatever, they can safely ignore this data and not spend too much time going into details that we just don't want to know. Right? Okay, this is just a capture from a recent research project that we did to determine the accuracy of remote viewing data. It's always helpful to have numbers, right? So what we see on the left side is each circle represents one session. It's divided into sections, and each section is a different perception channel, like colors or surfaces or materials or whatever. And whatever is green is what is correct in the session. So you can see we have sessions that are very good and sessions that are not so good from the same viewer. We have no consistency. So they have, let's say, good and bad days in what they do. We can still see kind of a pattern here. So we found that viewers have individual perception profiles in what they're good at or not so good at. And so the project manager, for example, can decide which viewers are best to task on a specific project. What we found, so we evaluated a lot of these series of targets, and we found a data accuracy or a total score of 84% correct data or accurate data, which is a lot, right? So we're in other constellations, like in ARV settings where you try to predict future outcomes, we talk about 65 to 68%. 70% is a good outcome, and 80 or above 80% is a lot. So still we don't know, especially when we are searching for the unknowns, right? We're not describing, of course, in practice settings, we are describing targets that we know and we can compare. Or in scientific settings, we know everything about the target, so we can measure how accurate the description is. In operational work, we are going for the unknowns. So with this estimate, we would say, okay, so we have absolute correct data. Relevance score is what I would consider helpful. You can, of course, come up with absolute correct data that is not helpful for solving the question. Can tell you, yeah, the viewer is on target, but he did not tell us anything new. Yeah, in operational targets, we're going for unknowns, so we have to, of course, determine how well a viewer is on target. So what we call reliable, and then with having different viewers and doing the same task, right? Working on the same task, and a consensus analysis will then show, let's say we have these 5 viewers from the previous graphic. If 4 out of the 5 or even 5 of them report the same thing, not knowing what the target is, then we would say as analysts or project management, okay, this piece of data is likely true. And this is what we would report. And then, of course, all the context around the sessions. So in the areas that we are working in, especially in technology, it is often the case that people want to know about the future. And then there is another thing that I would like to touch briefly. When we're talking about future, we don't actually know how time works, right? We have a perception that time is linear in the way how we experience it. But it's still possible in a way to describe future outcomes. We have, I think, Robert Jahn published a paper in 1982, Proceedings of the IEEE, with 40 formal trials in accessing future targets, and they found no difference in describing future outcomes compared to life settings, right? Present time or past time settings, which is interesting. On the other hand, we know there are some obstacles, obviously, and we don't know exactly why, to access future outcomes. There are different models of future. We have a probabilistic or what we call open future model. We can talk about deterministic universes or the block universe theory, which is essentially a collapse of the time, but not necessarily a complete determination of events. We are working as a working hypothesis just with the open future model because it's covered with the other models, right? What it means is every time in every second in your life, you're making decisions or do things. So with every decision you make, you just reduce the possibilities for future outcomes. But if we want to look at the far out future at the target, let's say in 2050, or look at 2050 technology or developments, it's not just, we cannot just go there and take notes and pull it into today's reality. So it won't work because then it's not the future anymore. But what we can do is, or what we usually do, is we look at the future possibility like at a deck of cards with several options. And so we try to first determine the options that are in question. And then, for example, we can look at the worst case and best case, or at certain probabilities. For example, if you have different technologies and you want to decide which one you put funding in, right? So you have, let's say, 200 applicants and you can only fund 5 projects. Which 5 would you choose? So this is what we can do. And also we have some indications, which is interesting. And this is one of the fields that we are still doing research on, is that it's apparently, if you look at a certain outcome, there is, and we don't know why, there is a higher probability that this possibility is more likely to happen in the future. So there are many possible explanations for this behavior. It can be that you just look at the strongest possibility, right, in this timely realm, or that you actually influence things. And we know that intention plays a big role in remote viewing in general. So this is one of the fields that we are doing research in. So what I always tell clients or tell people is, only because you have a hammer, not everything is a nail, right? There are projects where remote viewing can really unfold its strength in describing things. And there are also areas where we would probably say, choose a different psychic method if you want to collect data. So, okay, so far for the presentation.
Okay, thank you, Jana. Here's a question from one of our viewers named Melissa Urban, who asks, is there a resource for people starting out? I've been a natural remote viewer for a while, but I'd like to get some training and mentorship.
Oh, okay. I would highly recommend to check out a website. This website belongs to a project that I am involved in. It's called a Center Lane Project. And the Center Lane Project tries to collect the all possible data on the development of remote viewing history, and is especially concerned about on the controlled remote viewing method. That is what we mostly use for the applied projects. And I think maybe one of my project managers, Lily, is on the chat. She can put the URL to this website in the chat, and maybe we can also link it in the video description later. So this would be a good place to start with. And then we have several other organizations in the remote viewing field who provide information about remote viewing, educate people. We have International Remote Viewing Association, IRVA. We have tons of books on remote viewing.
The Applied Precognition Project,
Right? Yeah.
example.
Yeah, maybe we can collect some of the URLs and just
There are probably a dozen different organizations that train people who are starting out in the field.
yeah, and there it's also worth mentioning that there are different methods. So there's not just the remote viewing. We have a development over the past, let's say, 30 years, and there are several methods that just subsequently were created from the original, and then people develop their own approaches to remote viewing, and we have different ways of doing it.
Mhm.
Yeah, there also is a chart on the Centerlane website, this which shows all the different methods, and it shows the people and the names connected to the methods. So if one wants to look up a certain person, they can go there and get an overview of approximately how this field is structured.
And as you pointed out, we will add these links to the description of this video for viewers who are logging in late.
Yeah.
I just want to add that I really loved your presentation, Jana. There was a lot of rich information in there, even though it was quite brief. And I believe I know the target of the 8675309. I believe that's Jenny by Two Tone, the band Two Tone. Is that right? That's a
Uh,
song.
yeah, that's correct. This is one of the example that Paul H. Smith introduces to his students when we talk about how tasking and target numbers work. So
Yeah.
the 8675309. But if a remote viewer would try out this number, they would probably come up with a description of the Eiffel Tower, I think.
Right. Not everybody knows those numbers, but I remember singing that song in the 80s, I think. So 8675309. So anyway, I just wanted to let you know that that was very fun to see that in there. We have a question from one of our fabulous volunteers, Celia, who asks, what does research and development remote viewing imply? Does it mean remote viewing how to solve blockers in technological advancement to create new solutions in science?
Yes, for example, that's one of the cases. So um, I can give one example that I think we probably mentioned it briefly in the other interview that we did, Jeff. There was a question about let's start afresh. The underlying question is what would happen to energy production in the future if we, for example, decommission coal plants and don't want to use fossil energy anymore. And we also don't want to go with the actual state of art with nuclear technology. So what's coming next? How do we create energy? And so you can think of possible options that we have. And we also have several things in research or in research and development that are not yet ready to use, but they are promising. So you would then try to look into these options and see if you can find these options or these trajectories in the future. But it's not, as I said, it's not as easy as just going there and look at it, because in most cases, you cannot describe with the knowledge that you have, if you're not the engineer, what you see. And if, for example, or let's take a simple example. If you would task a remote view in the 80s to describe my phone, they would tell you, okay, it's a rectangular thing. It has a glassy surface. There are pictures on the surface, and it's made for communication. Would not help you to find out how this thing works, right? And so you have to have certain knowledge to get deeper into it, but also, and this is something that Hal Puthoff told me that they found in the early years of research. You would think, okay, it's possibly just that you need to have some engineers and teach them remote viewing and then let them remote view the future so they know what they're talking about. It's actually so that if you know more about a matter, you are likely or you are more vulnerable to come up with analytical overlay. So what we call analytical overlay is interference with your knowledge that takes you into guessing about what it is. So the descriptions from experts are actually really, we have to treat them with caution.
Mhm.
Yeah.
We have a question from a viewer who wants to be anonymous, who says, I tried doing some remote viewing myself, and I seem to have no talent at all. Is there any hope of learning or improving? Do you have any recommendations?
Okay. Yeah, the first recommendation is get a good, go to a good teacher and get some proper training. It depends a lot on who teaches you and how they do it. And it's something that I experienced in my life. So I went through different remote viewing trainings. I started out with one method, and then I learned, oh, there are other methods. And I said, at this stage in my life, I say, yeah, I'm going to learn them all, and then I can just look at them from a meta perspective and find out the underlying principles. Turn out, what I did is I essentially went my way back from later creations or later created methods to the original method, and I found it works better. And also, I would say my main teacher is Paul H. Smith, and he has an incredible way of explaining things and making you understand how things work and why. As for the talent, talent is distributed in the population with this usual bell curve, right? For every other skill, like playing an instrument or doing sports or whatever. So we have people who are more talented or less talented. But if we go with this example of playing an instrument, you can teach everybody on the piano to hit some notes and to at least play a simple song, or even the entertainer. Not everybody is going to be a pianist on the stage, right, and playing Beethoven or whatever. But I would think with a proper training or somebody who teaches you the basics, everybody is able to get at least some results that they have black on white, that they show it's really working.
Yeah. Jana, you also teach remote viewing, is that correct?
Yes,
You
correct.
co-teach with Paul Smith?
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
Yeah. And can you share, of course, there's professional remote viewing, and we have more questions coming in that we'll address as well about that. Can you share how people can, for example, maybe use remote viewing practically in their own lives, for their own personal lives as well?
Yeah, so the main thing that remote viewing provides for the personal life is first you get to experience that this perception is a real thing. Um, Most of us, we have suppressed intuition and things like that, and we all I think all of us, we have these moments. Let's say we have to make a decision and there's no argument to not to do it, but your gut feeling is, there's something, yeah, but then you still do it and then it goes wrong and then you say, oh yeah, I knew it, right? So um, doing remote viewing or practicing remote viewing helps to strengthen your intuition, your feeling for how it feels when this kind of perception comes in, right? How it feels to perceive things other than just what you can touch and see, and also to believe what's coming up, to rely on this intuition, and it really helps to act differently in your everyday life.
Mhm.
It's not so easy to task yourself on question that you want to know because you have to be blind. Some
Yes.
people solve this question they just create a big target pool, right? They write down a lot of things on little sheets of paper, then fold them, assign a number,
Hmm.
um, and then mix it with practice type targets. And so if you have a target pool of, let's say, 200 or 300 different targets, over time, you will forget what is what. So you won't remember, especially if you assign arbitrary numbers. So you have no idea what is what. And then you just, every day you want to do a session, you just pick one of the envelopes or papers and then write down whatever comes up, do your session, and then eventually you will come to the question you want to know. If there's time pressure, for example, it doesn't help. But also remote viewers are connected, so we talk to each other. And if the one has a question and they can task the other person and vice versa, and then we try to help each other.
Very nice. Thank you for that. So Pablo asks, can you please share, can you name some of the fields or areas where remote viewing can be applied? You've mentioned some of those. If you have any other examples, that would be great. Such as finding missing people or prospecting. Somebody else asked about, is it similar to dowsing? And what are some of the most notable examples of how you use remote viewing or how it's used in general?
Dowsing is different from remote viewing, but we can use dowsing within higher stages of remote viewing sessions. For example, if we try to locate things, in some projects we work with, let's say we had a recent project where we tried to locate an object in a bigger area. The first thing we do is ask the remote viewer to describe the object. And then when we know, okay, they're on target, this is the object that we're looking for, then we present them with a covered map. So they won't see the map, they just see a dowsing grid. And the project manager or tasker has prepared this map in the background. And they can then use this map to dowse where this object is. So it actually helps to connect to your target before you dowse it. Professional dowsers do their own thing, and they can certainly do it without it. But in remote viewing, we can integrate these techniques, also other techniques as well. Other fields of remote viewing, a lot of people do a lot of different things and try to use the hammer for as many things as possible, of course. With my team, we don't do forensics. We don't look for missing people. We don't predict stock markets. There are other experts in the field who have more experience in this. And so speaking for a project that we did, we try to focus on the strengths that remote viewing has. And the strengths of remote viewing is describing, right? Not naming things, describing things. So you can describe places, you can describe objects, and create sketches and tell what configurations and materials and such are. A recent project that is probably interesting in this regard is that we were tasked by NASA to do a project for them, where we were asked to explore geological features on distant places, of course. I don't want to reveal too much because possibly my viewers are also watching this recording, and then I don't want to compromise everybody for all the targets. But this is something that where remote viewing is really a helpful tool. So, and then when we come up with descriptions that we can match with sensory data that we already have, then the client can decide to further act on this and, for example, do additional measurements or send satellites or whatever, and explore whatever we found.
So it's helpful for information gathering, it sounds like.
It's always a supportive method, so it's not a standalone tool. It's just one tool in your toolkit that you combine with traditional methods that you have. Even back then in the military times, remote viewing was or did support other intelligence gathering methods, right? It was not the standalone thing.
Here's a question from one of our regular viewers. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Andrei Slavash Krasowski, who is talking about, he calls it collective psi missing, where a number of viewers make the same mistake or similar mistakes. I've also heard that being referred to as displacement. And is that a problem that you run into?
I know displacement is a problem, especially in the ARV field, associative remote viewing, where we try to predict an outcome based on two separate targets that you assign. So if outcome A is going to happen, then describe target A. If outcome B is going to happen, describe target B. And in those cases, it can happen that the viewer displaces to the wrong target. We have some displacement, or we have experienced some displacement in time occasionally, when remote viewers are tasked on a specific, let's say, coordinate or a specific place or event, and then they displace in time, and we don't, so nobody knows exactly why displacement happens, but there are certain theories. And one of the theories is that there may be a thing that in a different time, for example, or in a different place that is more attractive to this specific viewer. And they then get drawn to this place.
Jana, you mentioned that you said we don't do spy work anymore. When you say we, do you mean like the collective field or remote viewing? Because, for example, we don't know for sure if it's being used for government agencies or so forth. And so I was wondering if you could address that. And also, on that note, if you can address sort of the ethics around using remote viewing, because I know that's one of the concerns, even though, New Thinking Aloud, we're wanting to progress these topics forward. We are, I believe, and have been, thanks to Jeff and his leadership. But also, is that sometimes people can have fear of these abilities. And sometimes people question sort of the ethics of using some of these abilities.
Yeah. Okay. If I talk about we, of course, I mean civilian remote viewers or companies like um, mine. We are not accepting any projects where we are violating other people's privacy or spying on uh, competition in business or whatever.
That's
Also, people who are doing forensic remote viewing, and the big names in the fields are Pam Coronado or Sandra Hilliard, and they make sure that they work with authorities. So if someone asks you to look in to find a person, you have to make sure that there is a real case behind this and there's a legitimate approach to this question. Actually, we have encountered a negative example in Germany. I think it was a few years ago. I don't recall exactly when, where we had somebody who asked remote viewers for information about a allegedly missing person, and then it turned out this client was a stalker, and he tried to get information on this. So we have to be careful, of course, and we check back and make sure we have proof that whatever we want to investigate has a legitimate background. Ethics in remote viewing is a topic, of course, because we know you cannot shield remote viewing. Essentially you can look at everything and you can remote view people's private spaces, but we won't do it. So I can only speak for people I know and I work with, and I know that we always have the black sheeps in the field, but sheep, yeah. Still learning English.
yeah.
Especially.
You're doing very well, Jana. I'm understanding you very clearly. Yes.
Yeah, just sometimes I'm recognizing myself. I made a mistake. Okay, yeah, but we have these black sheep, and yeah, it's of course unpleasant, and we try our best to be professional in what we do.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you for addressing that.
Here's a question from a viewer, I hope I pronounce it correctly, whose YouTube name is Galawakun, who says, I wonder if you have used a EEG brain helmet to detect how the brain works, and perhaps in a close future development of some kind, that AI can help remote viewers to improve their capacities. It's a very futuristic question, I think.
So I personally have not used a helmet. I know we have several other people trying to do research on brain waves decades ago. So also, if you look at what the Monroe Institute does with their hemisync process, and I'm not. So I personally, I'm not quite sure if the brain or brain waves, physical waves, are the answer. My best picture is imagine you're looking at windmills standing on a field, right? So you have these big wind farms, and then there's wind blowing, and the windmills rotate. If you just look at them, would you know if the wind creates the movement or if the movement creates the wind? So we don't know. So yeah, essentially, we have a lot of research on brainwaves, and we have correlations that we can show, but I wouldn't say that correlation is causation in any case. As for AI, this is again a hammer and nail topic. AI is a new thing, and everyone thinks that AI can help with everything. But we're just right in the beginning of using this tool, and much of what people refer to as AI is essentially not an artificial intelligence. They're language models, they're programmed things that certainly can learn or replicate things that we already do. And they can, of course, help in working through big piles of data, right? And we have people who try to apply AI and use AI for helping with practice target tasking, with even with evaluation of sessions. I would still be careful or cautious about that, and because there are many elements also in the analysis of remote viewing that are still subject to intuition again, right? To find the right answer. And I'm not convinced yet that we have far enough developed AI model that can replicate conscious behavior. And consciousness is certainly involved in remote viewing as a process. I wouldn't rule it out for the future, but so right now, I would.
Maybe that could be AI can be remote viewed, I suppose, or maybe they've already been hired. Some of the people who've developed that to sort of a think tank, perhaps. So here's a question from someone whose YouTube name is Corn Pop, and this is something that is a nice basic question, but I think can help make this all relatable to people. They ask, is remote viewing considered a psychic ability? Do remote viewers consider themselves psychic?
This answer is very short, yes.
Yeah.
It's one of many different psychic working methodologies, a specific defined through several criteria that distinct remote viewing from other psychic modalities like clairvoyance, like precognition, like OBE, and so on and so on. I think, Jeff, you just a few days ago, you recorded an interview with Paul about the principles of remote viewing, which will probably be released shortly. I
In a
don't
few
know.
weeks, yeah.
Yeah, next year. So next year we will have this thorough explanation of what remote viewing is compared to other methods. And then, yeah, I recommend to get into this video. Also, the principles of remote viewing, what I mentioned, they are on the Centerlane webpage again. And I would ask Lily at this point, if she's still on, to post the direct link where you can read through the definition.
Well, we had a fascinating conversation with Paul Smith, and I think the main point he was making is that all of the different approaches to the paranormal use what parapsychologists call psi. That's a general term for obtaining information in ways that should be impossible. And that remote viewing in particular really refers more to the protocol, to the method that is being used, in particular the blinding that you referred to earlier. And the assumption is that everyone, if by virtue of being a sentient human being, has access to all information in time and space.
And the second important principle is the awareness of mental noise, what we call analytical overlay in remote viewing. And so far, I think no other psychic method has a process to deal with mental noise. in this way.
which is crucial.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jeff. Go ahead, Jeff. You were saying it's crucial, Jeff?
Yeah. But learning how to separate the signal from the noise is really basic to all communication.
Yeah. I just want to offer myself, having worked with intuition for a number of years, that I understand in remote viewing these particular methods that you're talking about, Jana, that when you say blind, when we refer to as blind, it means that the person who is using their intuition, psychic abilities, is that they don't know what the topic is. That's why they're given a number so that they can receive information without having perhaps some of that overlay or judgment or projection or interpretation of what's happening. And I just want to add that in my experience, having worked in healthcare using intuition, which, for example, one of the methods, which is just a term, energy healing, is where we will assess a person's energy, which is considered to be the spirit or maybe even the soul of who they are. And that there's this a hypothesis that when a person is not functioning well in mind, body, or spirit, that that energy might not be flowing well. And so I actually went into that very skeptically, and I was trained in something called Qigong energy healing, which works on the meridians of acupuncture, assesses the aura, and so forth. And what was fascinating is that, yes, we were trained, we knew we were working with a person, but I went into it skeptically, and I was able to accurately assess a person's energy meridians that correlated to different organ systems that, according to Chinese five element theory, correlated to either the physical organ or the emotion or the season that govern that organ. So I just want to offer that there are other applications as well, and that the feedback I would get, well, of course, I wasn't blind, I knew I was working with a person, was the client, and they were able to verify if what I was picking up on was accurate or not. So I know that in parapsychology, that's one area where these abilities can be very practical and helpful, is with healing or and wellness, just general health and wellness. So I don't know if you've worked in that area at all, Jana, or what your thoughts are on that.
This is actually what brought me to remote viewing. 8 years before I learned that remote viewing exists, I accidentally stumbled across whatever energy healing. This is what I would call it today. Back then, I didn't know what happened. I just happened to heal people and feel what they are feeling, right? So reflect their, as you describe it. So get a information about what they have, and then I was able to correct it. Um, and while I was trying to find out what this is, and then I just got involved with all these topics, and then years later I learned about remote viewing, and this is what then caught me. Actually, just to add to it, analytical overlay is more than just blinding, because whenever we perceive things, we usually, so our mind is built to interpolate data from, we just get little fractions and we interpolate the whole picture. I could go deeper into this if we have the time. But so we try to manage this process that our brain is always doing in presenting explanations for what we perceive. And we try to just strip the raw data from this process and separate data and analytical processed information, so to speak. It's not always noise, right? So we just don't know if it's correct. And this is why we separate the two.
Yeah. Jana, do you have a particular process? I know for me, I tend to, and this is perennial. This is what a lot of people who've been guests on New Thinking Aloud talk about with being able to connect with intuitive psychic functionings, is quieting the mind. Do you have a particular process, or is it taught in remote viewing? Or is it just simply like Russell Targ, who just says, I know you can do this, and just go ahead and I trust that you can get an image or use your senses on what's in my pocket, for example?
I know people have different ways of preparing for a session, and some choose to use meditation or bring themselves in a quiet or altered state even. For me, I found that the way how controlled remote viewing works, where we have a very strict placement protocol of how you work on the paper, this ritual itself helps me to just click into the state and be focused.
Yeah. Well, you're highly practiced and polished, I can tell, because that is like flipping a switch to be able to go into that mode. And I know when I worked in the hospital setting, I had to go in and out of patient rooms, the ICU, fast paced. And to be able to click into that, it does take, for me, it took me meditation and cultivating, working with a teacher, and years of, well, I shouldn't say years, many hours of practice to be able to do that. So, how long did it take you, Jana, to be confident and comfortable with your remote viewing abilities to actually use it professionally?
Oh, I still prefer to be in a quiet environment. So,
Okay.
yeah, occasionally I had to do sessions while I was, for example, sitting in a train or in a plane or whatever. And then it's hard because, again, there are just these mental processes that you have a certain attention span for your environment, which is evolutionary built in, I would say, to protect you from being eaten by a sawtooth tiger. And the more is going on in your environment, the more attention you have to just spare for this one. And you don't have this capacity to focus on your work, of course. So it's always helpful to not have many things going on in your environment. But in terms of just going into the process and focusing, I would say what the breakthrough for me, again, I can just speak for myself personally, was learning the original CRV, where we have where we go to a step-by-step process in understanding why exactly we do things the way we do things. So what is my mind doing at this particular moment? And so this creates a workflow that then you don't have to really incorporate this workflow as if it was something unnatural. Like if you learn to drive a car, and in the beginning, and even here in Europe where we have stick shift cars, you have a lot to do with paying attention at the same time to which pedal do I use and what do I do with my left and right hand and so on, and then all the traffic signs and so on. And later in your life, it's just something that is, working unconsciously, right? So I'm driving along a street and maybe I just talk to my to the person in the passenger seat, or thinking about things. And later I can't even remember how I got from A to B and what was in between. And my subconscious did all the work. Right? And this is the same thing that is then happening in remote viewing, or it's even easier because this process is actually a representation of the natural process of perception if you do it right. You don't have to learn or incorporate unnatural behavior. You just go with how it actually works. And then it's easier to do.
Yeah, and getting that positive feedback, for example, that what you described with the target was accurate, probably helped build your confidence, I would imagine.
Sure, right. And with every practice session we do, and of course, I don't always hit the target. I also have my good days and bad days. But with every session that you can compare to a feedback, you learn more about what exactly did I feel in this moment? What did I miss? How did I perceive things? And this builds up your experience and how do I function internally, right? So how does it work for me?
Here's a question, a couple questions from Pablo Giraldo, who is one of our volunteers, and who asked, first of all, how much time does a typical remote viewing project take for the whole process? If I'm come to you with a project like NASA did to do some geological examination of a distant location. Is this like a year-long project or multi-year or 5 months? And the second question related is, on any given remote viewing job, do you have a metric that gives you a sense of confidence or a sense of accuracy of the result?
Hmm. So the length of project, of course, depends on the question. In most cases, clients have more than one questions. Is more that there are interconnected questions that you have to separate into different tasks for the viewer. For example, there you have to describe an object, then you have to describe the place where this object is, then you have to describe the function of this object, and these are all different separate tasks, right? You don't want to mix it into just one session. The bottleneck in these projects is the analysis. A remote viewer can do a session in 1 hour, and so you can have these. You can have 10 or 20 remote viewers doing a session in the same hour. And then the analysts need 2 weeks to get through it. And then you need to write a report. Usually we do several rounds. So we task the remote viewers. They come up with an initial session where they just capture everything that they can perceive. And then we have a preliminary report. We check back with the client to find out which one of the viewer is best on target. So, and then we retask these viewers based on their sessions. So we don't introduce new data, but we, for example, I would ask in your session on page 4, you describe these around depression in this area with this stripy thing. Can you tell me more about this? Right? Can you tell me more about the formation, about the measurements, about the material, whatever? So we go through a retasking process. In some cases, we have several retaskings before we end up with a final analysis that we can present. And this can take several months from the start to the completion. But we don't do, so usually we have several projects in parallel. So what we do is we mix the targets. It's also good for the viewers not to work on the same thing subsequently, because they would just inadvertently come up with guessing about the nature of this task. So we have different targets, we mix them. We also mix practice targets in between the project targets. So they would have a different topic every time they start with a new session.
And
Okay, what was the second part?
confidence? Are you able to give clients an indication of how confident you are in the results of any particular project?
Yeah, similar to what I mentioned before. First, we have this evaluation, where we have actually a tool that we can apply to show the performance of a particular viewer. But in projects, if you make a list of, let's say, I've perceived this object. I just go with the object. This object is metallic. It is rounded, is elongated. It has 2 parts that are connected and can move. Right? And then I can just make it a simple table and say 4 or 5 viewers reported on metallic, and 1 said there is another material. And then 5 of them said it's green, and so on. So, and this gives me an estimate of how reliable a certain piece of information would be.
So you're talking about consensus, and the
Yeah.
consensus information is then passed on to the client.
We also pass on other elements. So first, not every session contains the same elements. So one may focus on one aspect of the target, and the other viewer focuses on another aspect of the targets, and there's a certain overlap, but they also report on different other things, and they may be right. So it's not that we exclude everything that has no reference in other sessions. If we read the sessions, we can tell in which context a certain piece of information comes up, right? And also there is an element, and we know if something for the viewer comes up very surprisingly, it's more likely to be a correct information, because then you can tell, okay, their conscious awareness, their analytical mind did not expect this information. It's just coming through, and so this may answer the question a bit.
In other words, you have more confidence in information that is of a surprising nature.
Yeah, referring to trained viewers.
Very interesting. We have a question from Aprovecha to Vedanja Extra. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. Do you have any recommendations for developing analysts, the people who interpret the remote viewer sessions?
This is a crucial thing, and this is maybe relates to what I mentioned with the rock band example. It's of course not easy to find good and well-trained remote viewers. It's even harder to find good analysts. So there are certain qualities that an analyst needs to have. I'm lucky to work with at least 2 analysts that are very good in their fields, and we also we have we need to have the ability to discuss in a way that we can exclude confirmation bias, which is a big issue in analyzing sessions. So this is one reason for having several analysts in a team, and then we have to have the ability to just step back from our ego and communicate on a level where we aim to just exclude the confirmation bias as good as possible. And of
Can
course,
you define that term, confirmation bias?
Confirmation bias is okay. I will bring an example maybe to explain what it is. I cannot just tell the Merriam-Webster definition right now. Let's say we have a series of sessions. Recently, we sat down with 20 sessions, and then I would start with one of the sessions, and in this session, the viewer tells the object, again, is metallic and rounded. And then in the next session, the next viewer says the object is metallic and it's rectangular. There is this, and we can't help, right? It's also just a function, a human function. We would tend to believe the first session just because it had an impact before, and we tend to, I wouldn't say data fit, but leave out opposite explanations for the same thing if we have we have had certain preliminary experiences. So, for example, what we do is if we analyze sessions, the analysts are working through the stack from different directions. And also, whenever we speak about what we found and where we see consensus, for example, we are always the one is asking that one, what can you tell me as an evidence for what you found? Show me the evidence, right? Show me in the data why exactly you are saying that. And it happens often enough that one person alone is without knowing subject to this confirmation bias that we try to form this picture or fit everything in this picture and leave out pieces that don't fit into this preconceived hypothesis, so to
I
speak.
get it. I get it. Of course, it's well known in social psychology outside of the remote viewing environment that people tend to accept factual data that conforms to their pre-existing opinions and ignore factual data that does not.
Yeah, yeah. And it's so easy to form an opinion just by reading things, right? This is
And I think, as you pointed out earlier, the mind naturally wants to have closure.
right.
And
It's, yeah. All the people who didn't have that, they are extinct, right? They were eaten by the sawtooth tiger back then. Yeah.
well, we should mention it's 9 minutes after the top of the hour now, wherever you are in the world. And we're going to continue to the bottom of the hour for another 20 minutes.
Mhm, mhm. All right. Jana,
Here,
here's a,
oh,
oh,
go
go
ahead. No, you go ahead.
ahead. This is a question for you, Jana, from John Bonatom, who asks, is there anything you would like to have remote viewed? And this is from by a team of the best viewers. Thank you. Greetings from Sweden.
Oh, yes. Yeah, but if I would tell, I wouldn't be able to task remote viewers.
Yeah, I think it's a trick question. I think they're trying to see if you'll share some details in your mind.
I would rather not share any details about targets that I would want to investigate. One thing, so we mentioned earlier, I'm doing a lot of research work, right? So besides the project work, we are working with a bigger team of remote viewing, and thanks to everybody who's dedicating their time and work to contribute to these projects. We had a recent long-term project that spanned a year. So we had 12 months of remote viewing, a target each week, where we tried to find out something about the connection of precognitive determination of events or precognitive remote viewing of places in this case. And we had a big team. We were able to collect about 1,200 valid sessions on this project. So we are still in evaluating, of course. Will take a bit of time, but these sample sizes are not normal for this type of research because it's a lot of work for many people to contribute, and we are I think before end of the year we will announce the next follow-up project that is then concerned about remote viewing objects, and this project will be called Code Red, and we will make announcement on our websites, on Facebook, on the groups that we are in. And so if anybody is interested to participate, they can also contact me via email, and then I send them the description.
Here's a question from a viewer whose YouTube name is Crystal A, who says, sometimes I see something terrible happening to myself or my family, but a minute later I watch the same incident in the movie I am watching. Why does this happen? Is this remote viewing?
This is not remote viewing. This is what we mentioned before. It's certainly psychic. A form of precognition of events, or people would call it visions, for example. Yeah, so I can't, you have the proof, right? If you then experience or see these events, even if it's connected to another person, there's certainly a pattern for you how to perceive things. Some people are perceiving things in a special way, or in dreams, or right, they have their mode of operation or mode of how they receive information. It's not the same for everybody, right? So if you find that this mode works for you, and you can try to find people who are doing a similar thing and then connect with them, maybe train it, or maybe bring it to to a more controllable state where you can work with it.
What we find, based on what you've just said, Jana, is that a lot of people, probably over 50% of the population, have a certain amount of, I'll call it rudimentary precognitive psychic abilities, but when it's untrained, you're not sure how to interpret it and or how to work with it. And most people probably just tend to ignore these things.
Mm. And this is why we need to talk more about each other, about our personal experiences, right? And compare how we actually experience things and what happens to us and what interesting synchronicities and events and visions, experiences we had in our lives.
I think we also need to take into account the fact that I'm pretty sure inside of each of us there's a trickster figure. It's an archetype. We like to play tricks on ourselves. And in my case, for example, at a time when my whole life was transformed by dreams, I was getting accurate information that in dreams that led me to choose the career I've been on for half a century. But at the same time, I was having a series of dreams that turned out to be completely irrelevant, but I didn't know that back then. I had dreams in which my family members were being killed in airplane crashes, maybe a dozen dreams like that. And I thought for sure something's going to happen, and nothing did. I've never had any direct involvement with an airplane crash. So it seems that you could call it just random, or you could say that we deliberately play jokes on ourselves, that this is something everybody has to come to terms with as they get engaged in professional psychic work.
At this point, we could probably mention the decline effect that is a phenomenon, not also in psychic work, but it is in this ESP sector where it's really interesting. What apparently happens is the first few times that you have this kind of experience is it's bypassing your analytical awareness, right? Your analytical mind. And then you then perceive a pattern, and then you say, okay, so every time a dream, for example, comes up, and then we apparently have an outcome, and then you are going to expect things. You're trying to bring it into a system, right? And then your analytical mind tries to take over the process, and then for a while this outcome is really dropping down almost below chance, right? This is what we call the decline effect. And then you have through training, you can get back to a certain plateau level. This is the same for sports, for example, when they train.
Yeah, very, very good point. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for explaining that, Jana. Jeff, I'm just curious for you personally. Have you found over the years that you can discern now when you have a precognitive dream or one that is prescient or psychic, or however you would describe it, versus one that's sort of that noise that, or maybe those were probability factors that maybe some family members might have died on an airplane and other decisions were made. How do you interpret that, and what conclusions have you drawn over the years from that experience?
Well, a good question, Emmy. And I can't say that I've ever made any effort to develop myself into a professional psychic. So I kind of just let the matter drop, the dreams stop happening, and occasionally I get dreams that are very realistic, and I'm never sure.
Yeah.
To be honest, and haven't made the kind of effort that Jana is talking about to learn how to separate the signal from the noise.
And discern, right? I think discernment is a really good word. Do you find that in your remote viewing work, Jana, that discernment is helpful, or how do you utilize what is accurate or not accurate information? How do you discern that?
Actually, so we cannot tell if anything is accurate or not before we actually have feedback.
Okay.
So this is the same for precognition. If I would see something, unless it's happening, I won't know if it's true or not, right? So and what we do in remote viewing is we just talk about probabilities, right? This about the context of information. We cannot tell if something is true or not unless it is confirmed or even not confirmed.
So the remote viewers are essentially just sharing what they're perceiving and then taking note of it, and then later they are told whether it was accurate or not.
Yeah. So another of these principles in remote viewing is that you have to have feedback.
Mhm.
If you don't have feedback, it's psychic guessing. It's not remote viewing in a
Okay.
way, right? Um, Without knowing or eventually having a confirmation on the data, um, it's not an outcome that we can define as true or not true.
I would
Um,
imagine, though, Jana, when you're working on applied projects, let's just say with NASA or some business where you've already signed a non-disclosure agreement, the client is not necessarily under any obligation to provide that feedback.
oh, they are. I make sure, so we have contracts with them, and part of the contract is that we require to get at least sufficient feedback to feedback the viewers on their data.
Hmm.
That does not mean we have to tell the viewer everything about the project. What we have to give them sufficient feedback to evaluate their own session and see if what they have done in relation to the question.
So here's a question from a person whose YouTube name is a series of numbers and letters, and from what I can tell, it looks like they're trying to say never should have come here is what I think their name is. And they ask, what do you think about the reptilians and other space people being remote viewed? Or is that something you work with, Jana, or do you have anything to share about that?
Oh, I think the only thing I would share about that is I would be cautious to interact with beings that we do not understand. And we have reports from viewers who say that they are perceived by in the psychic space. So as long as we don't know who we are dealing with, I would be cautious. I would not just jump on every um, interesting target that may be out there.
In other words, there may be some repercussions for the viewers who are looking in on other advanced life forms.
If this other life form is able to perceive the psychic perception, right? And we are going into the field of ethics again. So
Mhm.
what right do we have to be there? And we don't know if they like us to be there and see what we see. Um, yeah, this,
I mean, it opens up a whole other topic when we begin to bring up the question of non-human intelligence and
yeah,
UFOs, UAP, what are they doing, and all of the work that remote viewers have done over the last half century to try and look into this mystery. It gets very complex, and I don't know that we're any closer to solving the mystery as a result of it either.
I think this is the same that we had in this previous question. As long as we don't have feedback,
Yeah.
we won't know which one of the session is correct or not, and who was correct with their perception. We have, of course, data that leads us to assumptions or has some indication of whatever is reporting. Also, we have to take into account that with I would say with frequently or highly frequented targets, let's say a lot of people or clients who approach us are asking for proof of principle things, right? Or they're interested in just um, going with their own curiosity and find out, oh, who built Stonehenge and what happened with the pyramids in Giza and so on. With these, or even with the UFOs, right? Right now we have this. Of course, we have a big wave going on. Um, um, let me so one of the things that I found really interesting when I was learning about remote viewing and thinking about remote viewing, going back to 8675309, right? I'm sitting here and my decision is that 8675309 will stand for the Eiffel Tower, right? I write this down, and the viewer will describe the Eiffel Tower when they get this number, even if the viewer is not connected to me, even if they don't know me. They can pick this remote this tasking number in 10 years and still describe the Eiffel Tower. So somehow I created a fact in reality just by my intention that these two things are connected. And this is what we always do in our entire life, every day, with every thought we think, it kind of create reality that other people can access. So if people think, yeah, remote viewing goes through shielding and you can describe everything, that's probably true, but we have not found we have not developed sufficient means to distinguish between reality or what we would define as reality and imagination, right? You can describe whatever somebody has in their mind as the story behind this target. So if you have, let's say you have this photo with a white dot on black ground, and you are convinced this is a UFO, and then you task a remote viewer to describe what's in the picture, and they will describe a UFO because it's in your mind, right? There are certain pitfalls in this process, and even if you try to be absolutely neutral, if anybody in this chain of events, right, has loaded this target with some with a story. I know Stephen Schwartz talked about numinosity, right? Or we can talk about egregor in this context. We have, let's say, layers of publicly agreed or shared beliefs that are on top of the whatever reality is, right? And then if we are going to talk about multiple dimensions, it's even more complicated. I wouldn't expect that we can just dig through it and then come up with whatever is true.
Well, we're almost out of time. We have 3 minutes left. And so this is a good time to remind our viewers that you, Jana Rogge, are also the managing editor of the New Thinking Aloud magazine. We're working right now on issue number 8. So we've been publishing the magazine for 2 years. The previous 7 issues are all available to be downloaded for free by our viewers from the New Thinking Aloud Foundation website, which is newthinkingaloud, all one word, .org. And of course, aloud is spelled ALLOWED in the New Thinking Aloud, all one word. We also publish a weekly newsletter for viewers who are interested in having advance access and many other news items and information about what goes on behind the scenes at New Thinking Aloud, as well as artwork and poetry, are available through our newsletter. And of course, we have a book imprint. We are working with White Crow Books in the United Kingdom. Our first 3 books have already been released and are available through Amazon. We're working on our 4th book in the imprint right now. I want to encourage viewers to check out the books in the new Thinking Aloud Dialogues series on Amazon. And above all, I want to thank you, Jana, for all the time and effort and energy, and in particular, sharp intelligence and wisdom that you have applied to not only the work in remote viewing, but the graphic design on our magazine, and frankly, as far as I can tell, everything that you do. So we are honored and grateful to be associated with you, Jana. Thank you for being with us.
Oh, thank you. If I may have a last word, I want to take the opportunity and say thank you to the two people that are doing the most work in working with me, which are Lily Fowler as the project manager. So she's a person who can easily handle 50 people at once, which is incredible. And then Teresa Natuschke, she's one of my analysts, and she is amazing in what she does.
Well, you're fortunate to be connected with a good group of people, but I know that you seek them out as well.
Okay, so
Emmy, I want to thank you also for being a wonderful co-host. And most of all, thank the viewers, those who are watching or listening, for being with us, because ultimately the viewers are the reason that we are here.
yeah, and thanks for the invitation, Emmy and Jeff. And without your vision, we wouldn't be here.
Well, we will do many more interviews with you, Jana, I can tell.
It's been a joy.
We've just scratched the surface of all the valuable information that you have to share.
Hmm. Yeah, I could talk for hours, you know. Okay, thank you, both of you.
Thank you, everybody, for being with us. And may you all have a warm and cozy, or whatever you would like, holiday season. We'll see you next time. Bye for now.
Okay, I will put the Zoom link.
Hold on just a quick second, Jeff.
Hmm.